Welcome, my fellow Supercellians. This is the Creator Academy. I'm so happy to have you guys all here today. I see a lot of familiar faces in chat. My name's POWERBANG. Been a content creator here on YouTube for the past 8 or 9 years or so. It's been quite some time, and my roots are right here in the Supercell ecosystem. Came up on Clash of Clans, was there for the global launch of Brawl Stars, hosted the first ever Brawl Stars tournament, and even have the first showdown victory ever in the game. I'm so excited to talk about thumbnails today. And so the purpose of this class is to really arm you guys with a lot of best practices, tips and tricks, and honestly a framework to create better thumbnails for YouTube and pretty much anywhere across social media. This is also going to be accompanied by a tactical course that will come later on in the Creator Academy, and you can find the links to that academy in the description below. But first and foremost, I want to welcome everybody to the live stream, and I want to get some hearts in the chat for Supercell, because they take great care of their creators, and without them, this all would not be possible. So again, hearts in the chat for Supercell. Let's get into it. First and foremost, let's talk about the why, right? Like, what in the heck are we even doing here? What is a thumbnail? What is the purpose, right? We want to understand why we should care about thumbnails and actually what they do. So we're going to talk today through a bunch of things, a framework, etc. And ultimately, we got to start with video performance. We're going to be looking at how these thumbnails affect video performance and what it actually does for your videos. So first and foremost, there's two metrics on YouTube that are really of greatest concern for the platform. And those are CTR, which is click-through rate, and AVD, which is average view duration. There's a lot more in YouTube's backend as well, but these are the two holy grail type of metrics that YouTube is judging your content by, which affects distribution, ultimately viewership, revenue, all of those fun things downstream from that. But the big one that the thumbnail is tied to is click-through rate, right? Click-through rate is how often viewers watched a video after seeing a registered impression on YouTube, which kind of begs the question, what is a registered impression, right? An impression is if the thumbnail is shown to a prospective viewer for more than 1 second and more than half of it was on screen. So what does that look like? Let's go ahead and take a look at YouTube, and we're just scrolling through and we're going to be looking for, I don't know, let's watch some Clash of Clans, right? Let's scroll through and hey, I see Itsu. I see a familiar face. And I'm really feeling some German Clash of Clans content, right? So let's click that sucker and go watch ourselves some Clash of Clans in German. Big shouts to Itsu. The homie been doing it a long time, and that's good for his channel, right? That is going to bump up the click-through rate for Itsu. He just won. His metrics are going through the roof, but what does that mean for everyone else, right? That was out there that we just skipped past. You know, there's actually a negative effect potentially that could be on every one of those other channels, and that is their click-through rate went down because we skipped over, right? We saw their thumbnail, we looked at it for a couple of seconds, and ultimately decided this isn't the video for us. We're going to keep scrolling. We're going to click on Itsu. So Itsu stats go up, everyone else's go down. And great. Now we know what that means, but now what, right? The video thumbnail is one of only two major factors that directly impacts your click-through rate. And the other is your video title, right? The thing that's really prominent that you see. But this course today is focused specifically on the imagery, the thumbnail, the packaging for your video. And that is one of the areas of improvement that all of you guys can employ to dramatically level up your content. This is one of the single best areas where you can get the most outsized returns, which means I can do very minimal effort here, learn very minimal things, and have a huge impact on the performance of my overall content. So that's what we're going to talk about today. The table is set, and we're going to dive into it. So we're going to grow now. We're going to make better thumbnails, and I'm hoping that you guys have some questions. I want to answer those at the very end of our presentation today. So feel free to leave those in the chat as we kind of go on. But let's talk about considerations for thumbnails, right? I want to set up a bit of a framework here for you guys to consider. I grabbed a random one from YouTube here that I thought was cool, but has great visuals here. It's intriguing. But some of the framework to consider is the context and the clarity of the thumbnail, the emotion that you're trying to capture or convey from the thumbnail, the composition of it, which has a lot of nuance and complexity. We'll go into that in a bit. The color and contrast of the thumbnail, the text that it includes, and also the platform that it's being viewed on. And so these are some of the considerations that I like to use when designing or working with others to craft thumbnails for their channel. So first, let's talk context and clarity, right? What does that even mean? Context is what the video is about, and clarity is how obvious, right? Is it what you're trying to convey? You want it to be very, very clear what the topic or the subject matter of your videos is. So when somebody sees your thumbnail, you want them to immediately make the connection of the message that you're trying to convey. Should be obvious, right? But let's use an example here from Judo Sloth. Immediately, I'm looking at this thumbnail and I'm seeing, wow, there is a lot of town halls listed here. As a matter of fact, every town hall, right? He's got it listed in plain text right there. Great contrast around that. You can see it, but it's a really intriguing thumbnail. And the interesting thing is that the title supports this visual, right? It says tips for every town hall level. And props to Judo, the man's killing it. 5 million views on this video. The thumbnail did not do him wrong here. He's a great example of someone to study if you guys are looking to level up your thumbnail game. Second of all, though, we want to consider the thumbnail without the title. Is it still clear what the video is about? And that is an interesting question. There's a couple strategies here to kind of go about when you're crafting your thumbnails. We'll talk about those momentarily. But let's look at another example as well, right? This is a thumbnail, I believe, from OJ. And you guys are probably familiar with OJ, but great creator across Clash Royale, across Brawl Stars. And this one demonstrates the monk, right? And it says how to. Very obvious imagery here. And the connection that I'm trying to make is it clear? Is it obvious what this video is about? And for me, I think how to and monk is the conclusion that I would draw from looking at this, right? And now let's throw in the title. And what do you know? It's how to use and counter the monk. So amazing job here communicating clearly what the video is about. And with that, 2 million views to back that up. So props to OJ on that. Let's go forward and check out the 2 different approaches that you can use, though, to demonstrate, what this video is about. And those 2 approaches are reinforcement and a complementary approach. And what does that mean, right? Reinforcement. Let's look at that monk example from just a moment ago. How to use and counter monk, if you look at the title, is basically the exact same thing that we're seeing in the thumbnail. I can remove one and only look at the other and get a great understanding of what that video is about. So the thumbnail and the title speak to the exact same thing. That's a reinforcement method for your thumbnails. What about a complementary example, right? This is where the thumbnail and title support one another, but it's required that one exists with the other in order for it to fully make sense, right? Let's look at this example again from OJ. 6 million views on this one, so it obviously was incredibly effective. Look at the title alone. Pick everything in the middle. If you remove the thumbnail from this point, I'm not so sure that I fully understand what the context or the clarity of this video is. I have no idea what that means. But look at the thumbnail, right? I'm not sure I know what that means either. If I only consider the thumbnail and the graphics, it's like I see a rage spell and it says choose your card, but I don't really know what that means. But when you combine these together and you've got pick everything in the middle along with 3 choices, a card highlighted in the middle, and a choose, like I know that I'm doing some sort of draft here, right? And it's very clear to me what this is about, and now I'm intrigued. That's a really interesting video concept, and clearly millions of other people thought the same thing. The reality is here, both approaches can work. You'll want to consider the emotion that you're actually trying to invoke. When somebody sees your impression, when they scroll on YouTube and they see your video, you want to consider what you're trying to make them feel and how you're trying to lure them into your video to ultimately give it a shot. That kind of leads us to our next category, which is emotion, right? And kind of the theme of your video. With that, there are a lot of different things to potentially consider, and I've given a list here. This is screenshots are welcome too, guys. At any point, if you guys want to make some notes, get some screenshots, by all means do that, because some of this could come in handy for you later. I don't know. I'm hoping so. But for emotions, I listed about 7 here that I feel are really common ones. They're like the core emotions, and you'll see a lot of people utilize these in their thumbnail faces, right? You've seen happy. You've seen surprise. You've seen fear, like, I've been in a thumbnail or 2. I've been there. You see anger, right? Those are the emotions that you can convey very quickly with photos inside of your, your thumbnail. But there's also certain themes that you're trying to get across as well. Things like disbelief or amazement or shock, mystery, intrigue. You can be super descriptive for those of you out there that are creating educational videos or strategy guides, tips and tricks, etc. You could be very descriptive about what that's like. You know, maybe it's something with regards to an archer queen or something to that effect. It really varies, and you want to be deliberate though about how you're incorporating these into your thumbnails. So grabbing another example here. This is an example of Judo being surprised, right? And it's shocking, like a spending spree for Town Hall 15. That's crazy. What can we get here? We've got, new super hog riders and, apprentices. Like, there's a lot going on here, and it's definitely shocking. So that's an example of kind of shock. And then we've got confusion and intrigue, right? There's another example, again, from Judo. Town Hall 2s in Clan War. Haven't seen that before. Listen, I'm a bit intrigued, but also my expression says I'm super confused. Highly likely that the viewers are thinking something very, very similar here. Now you're looking at OJ. He's clearly looking pretty pleased with himself here as he's pushed all of his brawlers to 700 trophies. And that's impressive. That's not gonna lie. It's pretty amazing. I know my brawlers aren't all at 700. I don't know if any of them are, to be honest with you. Not a great player, I am. But OJ here is pretty decent, and 1 million people agree. Happy and amazed was the theme of the thumbnail. Now, Kairos, saw him in chat. Shout out to my man. I love this because it's got a little bit of a mystery element as well with the shadow, the outline of a brawler, and surprise, right? The shock on both him and Mrs. KT's face. It's like, man, so lucky, this is epic, but what are we talking about, right? We're getting super lucky. We're talking about new brawlers, but we don't know what those are. Like, I got to click through to figure out what that's about. We look at Wasim here. He's happy, he's amazed, and he has killed it in the world's largest Brawl Stars tournament. He's got some other characters in there, but I'm like wanting to see a little bit more about Wasim here. I want to dive in and learn what this is about. The right choice ultimately is really up to your creative interpretation. It is whatever you want it to be, right? But the packaging ultimately needs to reflect the same tone and mood of the product. What you have in your video, if it's a frustrating, you've captured failure, you're trying to, do a challenge and you failed, well, you don't necessarily want the thumbnail to be super happy and upbeat. Maybe you're like angry facing it up, and that's the route that you want to go. Ultimately, that's your choice to make, but you want to have cohesiveness with the packaging and the way you put your video together. So talking about composition, right? How do we actually formulate these thumbnails? How do we put them together in a way that makes sense, in a way that's impactful and effective? There's a few key categories here that I like to focus on with thumbnails and what I like to see others do, and what some of the top creators in the world, both in the gaming industry as well as in traditional media, have really leaned on effectively. And the first of these is focus. The next is your subjects that are in the actual thumbnails. And last consideration here is the brand that you're trying to cultivate with your thumbnails. So let's look at a few. These are random examples that I literally just Googled, not Googled, but I searched on YouTube. I searched for Brawl Stars video or, something to that effect, and saw some that popped up. And I really like the example on the left here. That's random, right? And you can see Lex showing off in the thumbnail here. But I love the wheel aspect of it with all of the different brawlers on there. You can see Jesse and Primo, and there's all kinds of brawlers, and immediately it conveys like, oh, it's random. That's reinforced by the big word random. So it's very clear what I'm looking at and the context, and obviously the title along with this only reinforces that point. Shifting to some of the other examples, we look at the who is fastest, right? And then we're looking at, the Mortises of the world to see how quick he actually is. Obviously, that's a very clear concept. And then on the bottom as well, again, Mortis shining like a star. There's a new record, rank 85 with Mortis. And it's very clear, again, what the context of the video is simply by looking at the thumbnail. Here are a couple examples where it's a little bit difficult, right, to tell what's happening simply by looking at the thumbnail itself. There's a lot happening here, and it's tough to determine what the packaging represents and what the context is of the video. Like, it might make a bit more sense with the title, but this is one thing that you should strive to try to improve so that it's very clear as a standalone, and your focus is deliberate, right? You want to have very few points of focus. I like to stick to 2 or 3 so that as a viewer, somebody that's consuming the content, when you look at a thumbnail, it's very clear, like, what are you supposed to look at? And when I look at these, I don't know what I'm supposed to look at, right? There's a lot of characters here. There's some letters, some words. I don't know where I'm supposed to look. And that's something that I think a lot of people forget when they're designing. They think it's more of an art project versus a communication tool, which is what a thumbnail ultimately is. Simplicity is essential. It's crucial. Keeping those 2 points of focus, really, really huge. Let's take an example here from Sir Tag. Look at the giant skeleton that's chilling there, and we've got 2.1 Elixir Pro plays. Very clear what the video is about in my eyes, and there's very little to focus on here. And so for me, this is a really effective thumbnail. I know exactly what I'm supposed to be looking at. There's only a couple of different points of focus, and we can take this to the next one as well. You can see, again, 2 very obvious points of focus, and the background, which is like a cool arena, it's kind of blurred out, and it's not necessarily the point of focus. It still adds some color, stands out on the background, but this is an area where it's like, oh, I kind of get this. And obviously, if you're a player of the game, something like this might make more sense to you versus a broad audience, and that's something to keep in mind as well, is how broad of an audience are you really trying to reach here? Are you trying to reach like your subscriber base, players of the game, mobile gamers, everyone? It's good to have those considerations as you're trying to develop thumbnails. Another great example here of an effective thumbnail, super high skill, and then you've got the troop right there on the screen, and you know exactly what it's about, who it's about, like the subject of the video, and also what you're trying to convey. Obviously, this is also reinforced with a great title, but the thumbnail itself is clear, has great definition, and I only am looking at a couple of things here, so this is really important. Lastly, let's take somebody that everybody seems to know and love. We've got Mr. Beast, right? And his thumbnails, if you go look at them, very, very consistently have minimal people in them. It's him. He is the brand. He's going to be 1 point of focus. And the other here is a $1 billion golden yacht, right? Like a massive ship. Other than that, there's not much to look at. And that's an interesting approach. And you can take a lot by looking at the most successful content creators outside of gaming, in lifestyle and traditional media. You can take a lot from them and actually examine what they're doing and apply some of their approach to a gaming-focused audience. So let's talk branding a little bit, right? This is all the same creator. This is Sir Tag. I think he does a great job implementing consistency across his thumbnails. Many times when I talk to audiences, if we throw up his example and they're familiar with Supercell and you throw these up, it's like, hey, who made these videos? And they're like, oh, it's Sir Tag. I know the text, right? I know that the white, yellow, white color scheme is Sir Tag's style and his brand. And that's something that's really key because it helps create that reinforcement, that recognition. And another thing that you can see oftentimes with creators is maybe a little tag in the corner where it might be your logo, or maybe it's an icon of a particular playlist. But that's something to consider as you're building out your library of content, is consistency across your content. And obviously Sir Tag here, killing it with his. Very consistent though. He's got the title or the subject on one side, that is 1 point of focus. And then on the other side, he's got the subject matter, which is the troop. Whether it's Royal Recruits, Giant Skeleton, Ice Wizard, it's right there. You know exactly what it's about, and you don't even have to dive into the video to understand it. So that is a bit more on kind of the brand and stuff that you need to be considering as you develop your thumbnails. This is an important time to, again, refresh, like, what actually is a thumbnail? Like, what are we doing here with this? Is this a great, like, way, if we go back one slide, is this, like, art? Like, is it supposed to be pretty? Is it supposed to, be like, wow, that guy is really a great designer? This is a trap that I fall into personally quite a bit. No, all it is packaging, right? This is, if you think of your video as a product on the store shelves, you want that product to stand out, and a thumbnail is packaging. It is simply a tool to communicate. And with that, you got to keep in mind the simplicity that the thumbnail actually offers, right? The whole goal is when you are scrolling on YouTube, you want to maximize the effectiveness of pulling people into your video. That's the sole goal. It doesn't matter if it's pretty, ugly, lack of color. It doesn't matter. It just has to be effective. And that's ultimately what you're striving for here. It leads me to color and contrast, which is one really effective way to figure out how you can actually lure people through the doors, right? Get them into the video and to give you a shot and to see if it likes it. That's not contrast. This is contrast. Look at this color. We've got some neon yellowish green here, and oh my gosh, this is overpowering. But did you look at it? Did you? And then let's talk a little bit of contrast here, having things that stand out from one another, and it definitely grabs your attention. But I'm going to move on from these slides pretty quickly because I'm not trying to blow your eyes out at this size. So let's talk vivid colors, right? You are competing with hundreds, thousands, heck, even millions of other videos on YouTube. They have millions of videos every day going up and onto the platform, billions of watch minutes, and that's a lot, right? You are all trying to compete for a share of those eyeballs, a share of that viewership. And one of the best ways to actually do this is to use vivid colors, which is why you see a lot of creators jack up the saturation, the vibrance of their thumbnails. And it works. It grabs attention, and that's what you're trying to do. You've got people that are just scrolling on their newsfeed, and hey, a video that grabbed my attention, awesome. Can you then garner the click when they look at it? Is that context and that clarity there for after you've grabbed their attention with perhaps the vivid colors? So I grabbed a few, right? We've talked a little bit about context and clarity. I think all of these are great examples of those. And then also when you look at the color and contrast, these are all very vivid, bright. They grab your attention. If you were to look at them inside of YouTube on the platform, they would all make you stop and be like, hey, this is interesting. I might want to learn more here if it's a video that actually appeals to you. So again, great examples here of each. And contrast, right? What does that mean specifically? There are two types. One is the actual, if you look at all of these examples, the contrast is in the thumbnail itself. So that means looking at the text, can I see it? Does it blend into the background? All the contrast means is, do elements of a thumbnail distinguish themselves from one another? So if Juicy J is in a thumbnail going, is he visible, right? Or does he blend into the background? Is he overpowering the subject? Do the elements stand out? And that's one thing that we're looking at with contrast, right? How well does your focus or subject stand out from the background? That's key, absolutely key, because you're trying to draw the viewer's eyeballs to what message you're trying to communicate, draw them into the video. But the next one, this is an interesting one that I don't think a lot of people necessarily consider, because they're looking at the micro. They're looking at how does this thumbnail look on my computer where I'm developing it, you know? It's really how different is the thumbnail from the other videos on YouTube. For an eye test, right? Does it jump off the page when scrolling? And this white and black harsh contrast was used on purpose to illustrate my point of how you're like, oh my gosh, I'm awake, I'm looking at the screen. But check it out. Let's go scroll real quickly, right? We're gonna scroll and see what we see. I've seen one video right now. I see another one, that neon green. It kind of grabs your eye a little bit, and it's gonna garner a click through. But there's a couple videos that we went pretty quickly to kind of illustrate this. These are two that jumped off the page to me as far as like grabbing my attention enough to read them, enough to read the thumbnail, enough to read the title. And I really like the color usage. And that's one of the things that you'll see in common are neon or primary, like heavily saturated primary colors like the reds, yellows, blues, etc. You can see it on the right with DM from Diablo 4. And then on the left, you'll see a lot of it, the reds, yellows, greens, and blues with Winsanity. Both of these kind of quickly jumped out at me. And that's something to keep in mind, is that you want thumbnails to jump off the timeline as you're scrolling to give that initial, attention or impression. So diving into another one of Judo's, thumbnails more specifically here, we have a great example that talks about the Goblin Challenge, right? He's got 3-star guides that come out. There's context here with the 3 stars and the check mark, and then it shows you the base itself and who this might appeal to. Another thing that I really like is the tag in the top left where it communicates, hey, this is a Clash of Clans video. So he's doing a lot here, but he's managed to keep it pretty simplistic and repeat a very consistent formula with the fonts, the placing of these things, and the colors. It all is part of a bigger series where it's gotten tremendous viewership. And so with this, you can see high saturation and vibrance, neon and primary colors, and the outline of his text. He doesn't just have yellow and white text there. It's not just chilling on the background. It's got a black outline behind it so that you can see this on the timeline as you're scrolling and very quickly say, oh, that's Goblin Challenge. I understand what this is. So let's talk text, right? That's one of the next areas that we want to dive into. Normally, you're looking at sans serif, which means without curve, right? On the screen, you're seeing text in all black letters right now. That is basically a sans serif font. What I'm talking about is you want to avoid like the cursive, very curvy fonts that are kind of difficult to read. You want it to kind of jump off the page and really kind of grab your attention. Text should be minimal. It should be very clear what you're talking about. It should have great contrast, and it should be simplistic in nature. You want people to immediately understand and not have to hunt through your thumbnail to try to understand what something might be about. Again, using a lot of the same examples from earlier, these are all very quickly readable, and it's very clear what the video is about. You've got Goblin Challenge. You've got Can't Be Countered. Ooh, that just makes me tremble right away because I've faced that deck, and that's nightmares. A little bit of PTSD for me on that one. Bonanza Challenges. You got top 5 decks. You've got the most broken deck and everybody's favorite Expo sitting behind there. You love that. Thanks, Juicy, for introducing the world to that concept. And you've also got Upgrade This Deck with the Royal Giants chilling back there. And all of it's very clear to me immediately. And they've done a great job of really emphasizing this text, creating great contrast around it, and making sure that there's a good outline here that is on screen so you can see it. Well, let's talk text, right? Is it even required? Quite simply, it's not. I like the example here from Cashman, where the title supports the thumbnail, right? Where he's got a love-hate relationship with Clash Royale. You can see it's inverted and, you know, flames on one side, but then he's got hearts on the other. And I will say that with a no-text thumbnail, if you have nothing on there, this is an example of complementary, right? A no-text thumbnail almost always will require the title to reinforce what it's about. If it doesn't, people will miss the context. They will miss the clarity, and they're not going to be able to understand what this video is, and therefore you'll miss the click-through. Ultimately, that decreases your click-through rate, and eventually your performance will suffer. Now, with some of the mainstream creators that I talked about earlier, right? We talked Mr. Beast. Another is Mark Rober, who's really effective at this. You can see no text on their thumbnails either in many cases. And it's very clear with a supporting title what those are about, but it's really about maintaining minimal points of focus and being able to illustrate and support what's in the thumbnail. A lot of communication can, just like in real life, be nonverbal. So let's do a little bit of an example, right? I went through YouTube and I just looked up Clash Royale and went and grabbed a random thumbnail that I felt like we might be able to improve a little bit, do a little bit of work. And I want to illustrate here how some of these changes that we've talked about today might make this a bit more impactful or effective or stand out a bit more. And so I'm going to come to the chat right now, right? I want to ask you guys some questions and, you know, kind of pose to you, how would you kind of improve this thumbnail? And I'm not looking for, hey, redesign the whole thing, scrap the concept, but just like simple elements, right? I'm challenging you. Give me a few things that might, you know, increase that click-through rate here. Not changing the overall concept. So checking the chat really quickly. I see Judo present as well. Ears are burning. What's up, Judo? Good to see you, man. All right, so we got the Prince of Egypt here. This is Muhammad Light, the GOAT, the undisputed king of Clash Royale, winning all the major tournaments. And once again, Mo Light has become world champion. And we're going to be watching a video that highlights all of his performances. An hour and 24 minutes of it. Man, that is an ambitious video, but I have a hunch that all of the aspiring Clash Royale pros out there might be looking to take a thing or two from Mo Light, or maybe even scout his tactics to figure out how they might counter him in the future. But checking the chat here, I see saturation. Remove a lot of the text. Add trophies in the background. More contrast. Bigger logos. Remove the background. Gradient some of the background to make the text pop more. Adding shadow to Mo will make him pop. These are a lot of great ideas, guys. You're catching on. So let's go ahead. And this is not, I'm not joking right now. This was 90 seconds of work on my end. I did not have the source file either. So all I did was just quickly overwrite some things, but tried to make it pop a little bit more. I took some of your examples that you just gave, added some saturation, gave things a bit of an outline. I tried to keep it a bit more simplistic in nature, increase the contrast. I got rid of the text effects, right? Tried to remove the drop shadows. And again, I couldn't fully remove them because I just wrote over the top of what existed there already. But the idea here is to try to take a concept and show that if you put a bit more effort using these frameworks into your thumbnails, I think that you can get a lot more impact and a lot more effectiveness in the results and in the metrics if you take the time to pause and think about the packaging of the video before you put it out there. I promise you, if you guys put the focus and the emphasis into this type of stuff, it will pay dividends, especially in the long run, because this is a learn as you go type of an industry. Now let's check these out side by side, right? This is way better in my opinion. Heath agrees in chat, so, or I guess he said, thank you. But it's like, this is gonna pop off the timeline so much more, especially the text. And the reason I say the text is specifically, can I read this as I'm flying by in the chat? And, you know, this goes back to our contrast type 2, which is like, how well does this actually look on the platform? Does it stand out? And I've got an interesting, example here. Hey, it actually kind of does, right? That saturation, the bold text and the outline. This is a desktop view, but this actually pops off the platform page. So I'm happier now with this version than I was of the old version. And again, that took 90 seconds, maybe 2 minutes of work on my end to get that done. Again, my background does have a bit of graphic design in it. And I want to talk in the future about specific tools like Photoshop and Canva to help you guys level up your actual tactical execution of a lot of these thumbnails. The good news is we're putting together a course right now as part of Creator Academy that will be live on the platform soon. That's going to give you hands-on advice on how to, draw a bit better, paint a better picture, package things a bit more eloquently so that they're more impactful and effective for the platform. And speaking of platform, you got to consider where you're actually developing, right? Where are your viewers? And you can find this by going into the back end of your YouTube analytics and look at the devices that your viewers are checking your content out from. It's really important. And many of you don't realize that mobile has substantially taken over, especially when we're talking about mobile games, right? Maybe 80% of your viewers might be watching on a mobile device, but you're designing on something like this. I know I'm sitting on a PC right now with a monitor as wide as my wingspan, but more and more viewers right now are watching here, right? You've got to consider mobile in your design of thumbnails. This is so important. And one of the things, I'm glad Judo's in the chat because he does a fantastic job of making things really great on the big, monitors, but they're incredible on mobile as well because it doesn't change the context. I can still see exactly what's there. It's fantastic. So again, big kudos to him, and he's doing it right. And this is something that all of you should be considering is when you shrink things down and really look at it at a small scale, can you still read the text? If you can't, if you even consider for a moment that that's hard, cut it out, remove it. You don't need it there. Try to make it as simplistic as possible. You can see what Judo did here was best strategy. Simple enough, right? That's all you need. Best strategy. I'm intrigued. What does this mean? And every single town hall at the time in the game is shown there. I want to know more, right? 3 million other people did as well. They clicked through. So again, consider the platform as you are doing that. Template, right? Consider using one. You guys need to consider the elements that YouTube brings to the table as a platform. And if you check the description, we've provided a little gift for you all today, courtesy of Creator Academy and Supercell. Again, big thank you to Supercell for doing all of this. There is a template that you guys can use and download and figure out exactly how your thumbnails could be better and, execute. But let's talk about that a little bit, right? Here's a thumbnail. Just, again, grabbed a random one off of YouTube. Will this appear effectively, like on mobile, on a playlist? Well, the cool thing is if you download the template in the description and start dropping this as a layer on top of whatever your thumbnail looks like, you can now see what this looks like, right? It's a bit transparent so you can see the background, but in case there is an embed and there's a title of the video at the top, there's a playlist, there's a timer, there's the progress bar at the bottom, the YouTube button in the middle. This is incredibly helpful to understand, hey, is my text gonna shine through? Or maybe I swap position of my face with the subject's face, because if my face gets blocked, meh, no big deal, right? But I want the words to always come through. So this is a really helpful way to start designing your thumbnails in a way where you guys are clear on what's going to be covered up and what's not. So if you want to download that, the link will be in the description below. Again, big thank you to Supercell there. And I got a bit of homework for you guys as well before we go into questions here. This is a really interesting exercise, right? We've got old thumbnails, right, on dead videos. Like if I go look at my channel over the past several years, I'm sure that there is evergreen content as far as the content is still relevant today versus content that is only good for a couple of weeks, right? Like maybe you put out content around a particular game update and it's no longer good, right, in a week from now. The question that I have is, can you actually get some practice on some of your old videos to maybe give them a second life, right? Give them some more legs. And so one of the experiments that I started to do, and I know a lot of other creators have done and have put into their practice, is they go look at their old videos. And the ones that are evergreen, which means they're still relevant today just as they were then, they actually update the thumbnail. And you can see what I did here is I changed the thumbnail on a video that had almost been out for 3 years and it was doing nothing relative to other performance, right? It had basically plateaued off, it had leveled out, and I was like, you know what? Let me try to actually change the thumbnail and see if maybe there's another, wave that I can get, a little more legs on this. And sure enough, change the thumbnail, and it started to kind of do this. And instead of having 30K views or 40K views, pretty soon it's got 120K, and now it's cruising towards 200K. All of that was initiated after 3 years of on the platform. I didn't have to remake the video. That's something that's incredibly important for you guys to realize, is you can actually give new life to videos. There's a common misconception that, oh, if I change a thumbnail or change a title, then the video is going to be killed or it's going to die or YouTube will, deprioritize it. That's not actually the case, right? Much of the time, when I go watch content, I've seen a video that's been out for a period of time, and all of a sudden I see a similar video from the same content creator, and I'm like, you know what? I've seen that, but I don't recognize that logo. I don't recognize the thumbnail. Interesting. And I click through, and sure enough, it's the same video, and they're repackaging it. So I don't have a standard procedure for your specific content necessarily, because everyone's content's different. Some of it's more evergreen, some of it's shorter, some of it's longer form. But consider perhaps putting in some A/B testing where you check out the click-through rates of your different thumbnails at the start of a video. And then the ones that perform better, go with those. Go to your old videos. And again, you've got absolutely nothing to lose with regards to, changing these thumbnails out. Because again, consider the video's dead. It's not doing anything right now. It's not adding to your view total or anything like that. If it works, you just got some more views, some more followers, some more revenue, etc. And if not, you got some great real-world practice with basically no downside. You got a chance to try to package your video better, and absolutely no downside, because the video wasn't performing. It had run its life as is, and that's something that you guys can do immediately. And honestly, it could shock you. Like, you might have a whole wave of new viewership simply by going through this exercise. So I want to recap kind of what we talked about a little bit more today, and then I want to open it up for questions, because I would love the opportunity to give you guys the opportunity to fire questions. Let's talk about things a little bit, get a little bit more interactive here, and really kind of dive into things. So as far as best practices to remember for thumbnails, it's really pretty simple. This is the framework, right? You want purposeful context. You want the ability for a viewer to connect with your thumbnail immediately. This is probably one of the most important things that you can take away from this particular discussion. You need it to be clear what it's about. Next, you need that emotion communicated. How is the viewer supposed to feel when they're checking out your thumbnail? What does that packaging actually invoke inside them that makes them intrigued or want to click through? Next is the intentional composition. We talked about focus and subject and brand, and really thinking about how you're putting it out into the world. The idea is to come up with consistency and also simplicity. As you're developing your thumbnails, you want this to be organized in a way where it's very clear to viewers like what this is, what it's about, and hopefully even who it's by, so that you start to get that recognition and that brand awareness on the timeline. I think that's really important. Next is vivid color and high contrast. These are some of the tactics that we talked about with regards to how can I draw a lot of attention? How can I be loud? And vivid contrast, high saturation, these are tricks that some of the best YouTubers out there use to draw more attention to their thumbnails. Next is simple and clear text. You don't even need text if you want to use a complementary style of thumbnail where the title is reinforcing it. But if you choose to include it, make sure that it's very simple and that it's very clear. What does it say? Is there contrast behind that text so that it stands out? And, you know, make sure if you're going to use text that it's just to the point and it's not overdone. And then lastly, consider designing for the platform. Mobile is incredibly huge. Make sure you're considering that, and then look at your thumbnails at smaller sizes. Quite literally, try to design it, send the thumbnail to your phone and look at it on the phone in the same manner. Like, try to do as many game speed simulations as you possibly can. And I'll try to follow up in the future with thumbnail templates for YouTube itself so that you can drop in a thumbnail of yours into a mobile kind of template. So hopefully that's a bit more familiar for you as well. I think that could actually be useful. Let me know in the chat as well. So I'm going to be pulling in some of the questions right now. I would love to interact with you guys a bit and hear some of the things that you might want to discuss, and we could dive into maybe some personal scenarios or whatever that happens to be. And it's time for us to dive in, right? So, question from Abdod, is having a logo on the corner a good idea? This is a really good question, and I think as long as it doesn't overpower the subjects inside of the video, I think it's a great idea. When you look at the, what do you call it, a thumbnail, you could add a logo in a corner. Let's pull up this Prince of Egypt one that we went to earlier. This has a Clash Royale League World Finals, logo on there. And again, this was increased in size from a smaller size that was there. But I think this logo, it provides context. And I'm sure you're referring to my logo as a creator. Now, I think that's certainly doable. You can shrink that up and put it in the corner. And the way that I would actually execute that is to do something similar to what Judo does here with Clash of Clans. You could do something very similar that's non-distracting, that is kind of out of the way, but also adds a bit of consistency and brand awareness to the content. I see no issues at all with adding a logo or something subtle. The main point to remember is that it can't take over your key points of focus, which again have to be the value that you're delivering the end user, right? Because no one's clicking your logo because they're like, I want to gas this guy up. I want Abdod. That's what I want, right? No, they care about the value. They want to know how to 3-star the Goblin Challenge. That's what they want. And so that has to be the focus. And as long as you don't overpower that with your logo, I think you're in a safe spot. Good to go. So with that, would love to keep going. And obviously, as you have questions, feel free to put those in the chat. How important are live thumbnails compared to VOD thumbnails? Questions from Grimity. I find this incredibly important both ways because as YouTube especially gets better and better at serving live stream thumbnails, because historically they haven't been great at that, right? Lives have been a bit more challenging to find. But as they've broken out the categories of content to videos and lives and shorts and now even podcasts, it's really important because the distribution is going to start to get better. The discoverability is going to start to get better. But regardless, if a thumbnail is placed in front of a viewer, whether or not it is a live stream or a VOD, you still have to provide that packaging, that value that's going to entice people to click in. One of the things that I recommend doing for live streams is a bit more planning. This is something that I've been guilty of in the past, as well as a lot of the creators that we actually manage at AMG. We see they'll just go live, right? Or I'll just go live and no real thought process behind it besides, hey, I'm going to stream for 2 or 3 hours today. Consider putting a bit more creative planning in place, right? Think before you go live, what are the key points that I want to illustrate during today's stream? What are some of the adventures we're going to go on? What are some of the crazy, outrageous things that might be highlights of today's stream? And key in on one of those. You'll want to key in on the most, intriguing, outrageous, mysterious, amazement, all of those themes that we talked about earlier in the presentation. You want to key in on those and highlight those as a key moment as part of your live stream, and really lean into that and hopefully get people to click through. And the idea would be to kind of build up anticipation, continually teasing what's to come, which is basically the subject of your thumbnail. But ideally, you're going to put just as much effort into your thumbnails for live streams as you would for VODs. I highly recommend actually giving that emphasis, because I know in the past this is my live thumbnail, right? Where I've got it says live now and POWERBANG in my picture, and like maybe some game footage that has no context. It's not clear what this is even about. It gives you a little bit of a theme, but that's it. So I'm not intrigued to click into that. So definitely put forth the effort. Again, thank you for the question, Grimity. Kairos points out, while we wait for this next question, to truly make a live stream successful, come up with a story that you can actually make a good thumbnail for. For example, 1,000 trophies in 1 hour. 100% agree with that. Again, the concept of 1,000 trophies in an hour is an easy one to communicate in a thumbnail, and that's going to get people through the door. And no matter where they enter on that journey, whether they come at the start or whether they come halfway through, you can keep them retained, and you can walk those viewers along to the end point of the stream. So it's a fantastic point. Highly agree with it. Should the text be rotated, tilted, or straight? Question from Gaming Warrior. I think this is a matter of personal preference, and this is an area where you can actually differentiate yourself a little bit. Similar to some of the thumbnails that we described earlier, you'll notice that Judo Sloth actually has a bit of curvature to his thumbnails. Sir Tag has like straight thumbnails for the most part, but in kind of a fancier font, if you will. There are many different ways to go about this, but the primary takeaway is that you need to do the eye test and really be brutal about your own thumbnails and your own content, and consider, can I read this instantly? Even if I'm not a great reader, does it jump off the page, and can I immediately recognize what it says? Again, don't worry about the art and the aesthetic, right? Where we're focusing in on straight edges versus curved edges. None of that matters. It's a tool to communicate, and it's packaging. So that the real test is, when I glance at this for 1 second, do I take away exactly what it's about? And if I can, I think it passes, right? If an impression is served to you and you can understand what the concept of the video is, I think that's mission accomplished from a thumbnail perspective. And I think that whether or not that's curved, straight, it doesn't honestly matter, is what I'm getting at. So again, great question. Bringing in, another point from Judo is, again, very contextual. It depends on the video and the audience you're trying to reach. And, if it doesn't add value, it shouldn't be there. And that ultimately, I made this point a bit ago. That's what I always come back to, whether it's thumbnails, whether it's video, whether it's business, anything in life, right? If it doesn't add value to the experience, cut it out. And I know that can be difficult. You could have spent time crafting part of your story or playing a great game, but if it doesn't add to the narrative and what you're trying to accomplish with the video itself, has to be cut. You've got to, increase that retention, which again is a separate subject. And we've got a million different things on retention and increasing that as part of the Creator Academy. Again, if you haven't checked that out, you guys can do that at creators.supercell.com. You can find that link in the description below. Lots of courses coming out over the next year. Really excited about that once again. But again, retention, huge. And the thumbnail portion of it, which I'm going to stay focused on today, is the gateway, right? That's the hook. That's what's going to get people into to give your video a chance. All right, so thoughts on having the creator in the thumbnail with a facial expression versus a character from the game that they're covering? Question from Clash of Style. This is a fantastic one and one I get a lot. This one can be a bit more personal preference, but again, I encourage you to be brutally honest about what stage you're at in your career, right? For example, most mobile gaming creators are famous or successful, popular, if you will, because of the game. The material that you're covering is the reason that people come to see you at first, right? Eventually, you build a community. You build a brand, you set yourself apart, you become relatable. You know, you've ascended to the levels of the Judos and the OJs and the Kairoses, the people that are here in chat right now, and that have been successful over time. That's what happens eventually, but you start somewhere, right? And that somewhere is likely not this face. You know, it's not like I wouldn't have put my face on the thumbnail early on, and I didn't. I focused on things like the Witch and the Golem and the Hog Rider. I think that's much more effective for smaller creators because for a couple of reasons. One, it communicates better what the subject of the video is. And if you're going to set a limit of 2 key points of focus in a thumbnail, maybe 3 at the most, if one of those has to be you lose the ability to communicate something of value to the audience, right? If you're putting your face out there, which at this very moment, if you're small and not established or inexperienced or whatever the scenario might be for you, people don't know or care about you. Unfortunately, it's real talk, but you know, we're gonna get there, right? We're gonna work our way to that point. But if half of the screen is your face and they don't care about you, you've wasted half of the real estate to communicate an idea or a point or concept. So better than your face is a Hog Rider or Shelly or some other character, right, that makes sense for the context of the video. I would highly lean on that early on, but as you start to gain a following, you might start to consider working your face and yourself into the thumbnails. And the reason I say that is because this gives you legs and longevity as a creator and allows you to start building up a brand that's independent of the games that you play. Eventually, if you become a big enough creator, there are other opportunities that are out there, right? And you don't want, if for some strange reason your game comes to an end, you don't want your career, if you make it to that point, to come to an end with it. So I think it's a process. I think it's a gradual transition potentially. But to start out, highly recommend leading on the characters and the subject matter that most people are searching for when they see your thumbnail impression. Thank you so much for the question. That's great. All right. OJ kind of chiming on that point. Even though my face is recognizable, I don't always include it in the thumbnail because sometimes the idea is more important than my reaction. And couldn't agree more. You know, as much as I want to put my stupid face on my stupid thumbnail, like ultimately it's like the viewer is not looking for me, right? They're looking for something that I am making about the video. And I think to give a bit more depth to this and a bit more context, I think this is especially true in strategy or educational content. There's 2 real types of content, right, in gaming. One is entertainment and one is educational. And if you're entertaining, and I'm talking videos like Let's Plays and streams and things where you're just trying to have fun and use your charisma and personality to drive the content forward, that's a much better scenario for putting your face on the thumbnail because truly you are the subject of the content. But if the subject matter is educational in nature, and you are, you know, really trying to drive a strategy guide home or give some tips and tricks, people aren't searching, hey, POWERBANG'S stupid face, and also tell me some ways I can attack with Hog Riders, right? It's, I want Hog Rider strategy. That's what I'm searching for, so you can get rid of me out of the thumbnail. I'm sure OJ can relate. Anyway, let's go to the next question. All right, we have, is clickbait okay? I love this one. Gaming Warrior, thank you so much for the question. Clickbait is absolutely okay, but let's define a little bit what we're talking about here, right? Again, the click is what we're going for here. We're trying to put out desirable packaging. And again, that's all that we're doing is communicating ideas. And if you're baiting people into a click, that's fantastic. But again, remember, if you go all the way back to the very beginning of this presentation, there are 2 key metrics that you need to be focusing on. One is click-through rate. The other part of this equation is your average view duration or average percentage viewed. Both of those are important. The problem is if you bait people into clicking and you don't deliver on the subject of that video, if you don't deliver on their expectation coming into it, your retention is crushed. They are out like a thief in the night faster than you can say anything. And not only does it kill your retention, it kills your credibility and your brand. So clickbait is certainly okay. But there's a lot of pressure that if you're going to make claims and if you're going to put something in a thumbnail and if you're going to entice people to click, you got to deliver. And ultimately, that delivery is what is the most crucial thing out there for building your brand and also retaining viewers. Because again, first half of the equation, get people through the door. Increase the rate that people click on your thumbnails. That is the thumbnail's job. The content's job is to retain the viewers and deliver value. Whether that's in the form of entertainment and I'm having fun with my time that I'm spending with you as a creator, or whether it's, wow, I learned a lot and it took no time to do so. This is fantastic. That's what you need to be delivering on. And every single time in the future, when somebody sees a thumbnail and it's themed the same way they saw your last one, consistency and brand, brand strategy, right? And they click through, they have an expectation of what to expect. This is why Mr. Beast crushes and continues to deliver, because he never disappoints in his videos. When he says something in a thumbnail, he delivers. And that's massive. That's credibility that's gained over time. So again, back to the original point of, is clickbait okay? Sure. Just make sure you deliver on it once you get people to click through. Let's go to the next question. Do you have any suggested fonts or personal favorites? I actually do, as a matter of fact. Let's go with, honestly, the Supercell ones are really good. If you go with Nougat, which is the Brawl Stars font, I believe that is a favorite of several creators out there. Very, very attractive. Supercell headline font is great, both the heavy and the bold styles. Supercell Magic is classic, and it speaks to like the Supercell ecosystem, which is great. But to go outside of that a little bit and grab some others, I think Bebas is a really good one. That's Bebas, really good one. Let's see here. That's about all I have off the top of my head, but I think you can't go wrong with a lot of the fonts that Supercell puts out, and it keeps you really on brand with the game. So if you are trying to get click-throughs and views, you can't go wrong there. But I do think that creating a bit of a different style, perhaps, could help to differentiate you as a brand. But again, highly recommend going to a font website and just browsing. And again, considering readability more than anything. One way that I like to do that is if you were to go to any font website, just Google free fonts, right? You go to one of those and type in the title of your thumbnail, like whatever you think a thumbnail might be about, whether it's Goblin Challenge, like we talked about earlier. Write down Goblin Challenge and look at examples of different fonts in as big of a font style as you can, and see how clear it looks. And as you scroll through, like, see if you're satisfied with it, and start downloading those and make a library of them. And then obviously make sure that you have the license to use any fonts that you're downloading, because that can be quite a headache later. Make sure that you have permission to use them commercially. So there's that. Let's go with the next question. But as OJ pointed out, and we mentioned earlier on, sans serif. That is the key. Very, very rarely I see other than like a serif font work with some curves to it, but the amount of times I see that executed successfully, I would just say steer clear of them altogether. Use fonts that have no curves. They're blocky letters. Those are going to be the clearest to read when you're scrolling through the timeline. Let's keep it moving. How often should you leave a thumbnail up before you decide to change it? Boss Pook, thank you for the question. This is again, could be different for everyone. However, some of the things that I've learned are, I like to gain a bit of an A/B sample test early on in the video's life. So I would say maybe even 48 to 72 hours. It's okay to change and try it again. But you have to be mindful of when the majority of your views come. You don't want to have all of your views come in the first 24 hours and then barely anything after that, because you'll need the opportunity to gain a fair sample size and really compare apples to apples between thumbnails. With regards to dead thumbnails, right? This comes down to analyzing the actual view graphs, right? You can just look at the graph and see as it slopes down, if it's bottomed out and you're not doing anything anymore, you're free anytime to be able to change those thumbnails out. But typically there are large creators out there. I'm trying to think, maybe Linus Tech Tips. You're going to see a change at like 72 hours, after a week, and then after a year. And this is standard practice where you're just trying to get a little bit more life out of a video. And if somebody sees a thumbnail and they want to watch it again, or they think it's new content, that's an interesting strategy. Or as many times, like I can attest to this personally, and I'm sure many of you that are media connoisseurs can as well. There are times when I see a video and I just don't click it for whatever reason. And I don't know why, but I see it and then I see it again and it's like, okay, YouTube really wants me to watch this video, but I'm still not gonna. And then I see the thumbnail change and I'm like, that's that same vid. All right, I'm kind of curious now, and I'll click through. And it's the thumbnail that really got my attention when it changed. So again, I think it's very subjective. I think a lot of it comes when your viewership is hitting your videos. If you have more of a long lead time on your videos where they pick up steam and they're popular over months, you have a bit more flexibility to change those thumbnails. But you can schedule the changes. Don't change videos that are doing well. If you're still, going to the moon on a particular video and you have a scheduled thumbnail change, let it ride. Don't try to impact something that's working well. Famous adage, right? If it ain't broke, don't fix it. But for those things that are stagnant and dead, change those as much as you want and see, A, if you can get some practice, but B, if you can start to speak a little life back into those. All right, next question. We'll do one more here and then wrap up. This has been a super great session. What do you do when you love a thumbnail, but when it goes on the video, the CTR crashes from Neptura Network? Ooh, I love this one, Neptura. You change the thumbnail because who cares if you love it? Honestly, the whole point of the thumbnail is, does it drive traffic? Does it get people to click? I have been in this boat more times than you can count where I like the design of something. It speaks to me from an aesthetic standpoint, but the aesthetics don't matter. Again, to look at Mr. Beaston as an example, look at his banners and stuff. It's scribbled MS Paint, subscribe, and it's not eloquent. It doesn't look nice, but it works. It converts, and ultimately that conversion is what you guys are looking for. So it's a perfect question to end on. The packaging is designed to drive viewership, and if it doesn't do that, it's failing its purpose. And if it's failing its purpose, it needs to be adjusted. So again, that is the end-all be-all of thumbnails. Is does it drive clicks? And if that click-through rate is a bit too low, may wanna consider tweaking it. So again, big shout-outs to everybody that tuned in today. I really appreciate the attention. I want to hear your feedback as well. So let us know if this was helpful at all. We'll follow this up with an actual course speaking tactically to how to control the mouse and keyboard and give you some tips and tricks inside of Photoshop, inside of Canva, and make sure that you guys are equipped to deliver on a lot of the philosophy and the actual strategy behind YouTube thumbnails. But anyways, thank you so much for all of you tuning in today. A big thank you to the Creator Academy and Supercell for putting this on. Take great care of their creators, and you guys are absolutely lucky to have them as a developer and publisher. Again, my name's been POWERBANG. I hope to see you guys soon. I'm sure you'll be seeing a lot more of me. And until next time, this has been the Creator Academy. We'll see you guys later. Have a great day.